The road leaving the Navajo Valley stretched long and dusty beneath the wide western sky. Samuel Cole rode slowly, his horse moving with the calm rhythm of a man who had spent most of his life on the trail. Behind him lay the quiet valley and the Navajo village that had offered him shelter. Ahead waited another town, another story. Out here in the frontier, trouble had a way of finding men like Samuel. By late afternoon, Samuel reached a small frontier town resting along a dry riverbed. Wooden buildings lined the dusty street. A blacksmith's hammer rang in the distance, horses snorted from the stables, and somewhere a piano struggled through a cheerful tune. Samuel tied his horse at the stable beside a modest restaurant. The smell of stew drifted through the doorway, warm and inviting. Inside, a woman worked behind the counter, stirring a large iron pot. She looked up as Samuel stepped in. "Well now," she said with a friendly smile. "Howdy, stranger. What can I get you?" Samuel removed his hat politely. "Howdy, ma'am. If that stew smells half as good as it tastes, I reckon I'll take a bowl." Moments later, a steaming bowl sat before him. Samuel took a slow bite, then another. He nodded appreciatively. "Ma'am, that's the finest stew I've had in a long while." The woman laughed. "Name's Olivia. Glad you like it." After finishing his meal, Samuel thanked her and headed toward the saloon. Inside, cowboys laughed loudly over cards and whiskey. Samuel ordered a drink, finished it quietly, then stepped back outside. As he walked toward the stable, Olivia suddenly stepped in front of him. "Hold on a moment," she said carefully. "Your name wouldn't happen to be Samuel Cole, would it?" Samuel narrowed his eyes slightly. "It depends. Who's asking?" Olivia replied, "I heard about you from a cowhand who passed through town about the fight at Ellis Ranch." Samuel sighed. "What's this about?" Olivia gestured toward a table in the corner. An older rancher slowly stood up. His face was worn by years of sun and worry. Beside him stood a young woman with sharp, determined eyes. Olivia said softly, "This is David, and this is his daughter, Lily." David extended his hand. "Mr. Cole, I'm mighty grateful you agreed to listen." David began explaining the trouble. He said, "My ranch sits near the only creek for miles. That water makes the land valuable. My neighbor Lucas has been trying to buy it for months." Samuel leaned back in his chair. "And you ain't sellin'?" David shook his head. "No, sir. That land belonged to my wife before she passed." "Lucas didn't like that answer," Lily added. "So now his men steal our cattle, scare off workers, and follow me whenever I come to town." Samuel stood slowly. "Look, I ain't a hired gun." David sighed. "I understand. But I'm worried about my daughter," he said quietly. Samuel paused. The sincerity in the old man's voice struck deeper than any offer of money. Finally, he sighed. "Well, I suppose I could take a look at the place." The next morning, Samuel rode with them to the ranch. Rolling grassland stretched around the wooden buildings. Cattle grazed near the creek while cowboys repaired fences. Lily showed Samuel the property. Barns, corrals, the narrow creek that kept everything alive. "Not a bad spread," Samuel admitted. Lily said proudly, "We built most of it ourselves." That night, distant hoofbeats echoed across the prairie. Samuel stepped outside, revolver already in hand. Several riders were herding cattle toward the dark horizon. Samuel fired a warning shot. The riders panicked. A brief exchange of gunfire lit the darkness before they fled. A few days later, Lily rode to town with her father. Outside the saloon, several cowboys leaned against the rail. "Well, look here," one of them sneered. "Ain't that Lucas's favorite ranch girl?" Lily ignored them, but one cowboy stepped forward and grabbed her arm. "Let go of her," David snapped. The cowboy laughed and shoved the old man aside. Humiliated and angry, Lily returned to the ranch and told Samuel everything. Samuel listened quietly. "Tomorrow," he said calmly, "you're going back to town." David looked shocked. "Are you crazy?" Samuel smirked slightly. "Don't worry, I'll be close." The next day, Lily rode into town alone. The same cowboys appeared again. Well, well, she came back. One cowboy stepped forward, but another voice cut through the street. "That's far enough." Samuel stood at the end of the street, revolver resting loosely at his side. "If any of you boys feel brave, try bothering that lady again." One cowboy drew his gun. Samuel fired first. The gunfight lasted only seconds. Two men dropped wounded while the others scrambled for cover. "You just made a big mistake," one of them shouted while retreating. Back at the ranch, Samuel stayed on. He helped repair fences, brand cattle, and train the younger cowboys. He even showed Lily's younger brother how to handle a revolver safely. Over time, Lily and Samuel developed a quiet respect for each other. But Lucas was not finished. One evening, a large group of riders stormed toward the ranch. Gunfire erupted across the fields. Cowboys took cover behind fences and wagons. Samuel fired with calm precision, dropping attackers one by one. Lucas himself rode forward, shouting orders. Samuel aimed carefully and fired. Lucas fell from his saddle, badly wounded. Seeing their leader down, the remaining riders fled into the dust. Weeks later, Lucas sold his ranch and disappeared from the region. David eventually bought the land, expanding his ranch across the valley. For the first time in months, the ranch felt peaceful. Cattle moved calmly across the fields, cowhands repaired the last broken fences, and the creek flowed freely again beneath the warm western sun. Samuel stood beside the wooden corral one morning, tightening the saddle on his horse. The sound of approaching footsteps made him pause. "Leaving already?" Samuel turned and saw Lily standing a few steps away. He gave a small smile. "You knew I wouldn't stay forever." Lily crossed her arms, pretending to sound annoyed. "Well, you could have stayed a little longer. The ranch still needs a good gun around." Samuel chuckled softly. "You folks can handle yourselves just fine now." David soon walked out of the barn, wiping dust from his hands. "Mr. Cole," the old rancher said warmly, "I still don't know how to thank you." Samuel tipped his hat. "No thanks needed. Just keep that ranch standing." For a moment, the three of them stood there in the quiet morning light. The wind rolled gently across the prairie grass. Finally, Samuel mounted his horse. "Well, reckon it's time I ride." Lily watched silently as he turned toward the open plains. "Hey, Samuel!" she called suddenly. Samuel looked back. "If you ever pass through this town again, there'll always be a place for you at David's ranch." Samuel gave a small nod, then nudged his horse forward. Slowly, the lone rider disappeared into the endless western horizon. And somewhere beyond those distant hills, another adventure was already waiting.